Hello there. So, the new season of Black Mirror, season 7, dropped this month in April, on April 10th on Netflix. And I have a lot of thoughts about it that I wanted to share with you. Overall, I do think it was a very good season, I will say, before we get to the breakdowns of the episodes. I think it was a solid season. I think it definitely made up for the kind of random season that we had with season 6 that seemed like it came out forever ago. I definitely think that we had more strong episodes than weak ones, although there was one episode that I couldn't stand. I couldn't stomach it. But that's a very personal thing, and I will explain why when we get to it. So this review is going to be divided into all of the episodes, all six of the episodes, and then we will talk about feelings towards the season and what I think could have been made better and what think could have been made worse. Heavy spoilers, obviously, for the entirety of Black Mirror season 7, and I will be dividing all of these reviews into a breakdown of what happens in the episode and then my feelings about the episode. Okay, let's jump into it. What would you do if the most important person in your life got into an irreversible coma and a mysterious company told you they have a solution that will bring your loved one back, and all it would take would be a free surgery and a subscription of $300 a month? That's the premise of Common People, the first episode of season 7 of Black Mirror, which came out just a couple of days ago on Netflix, bringing the sci-fi modern classic back to the public when, let's face it, we needed it the most. Common People tells the common story of Michael and Amanda, a couple about to celebrate their wedding anniversary with a weekend getaway to Juniper, the inn where they got married 3 years ago. After a night of their traditional Juniper bread burgers that look so delicious, I'm really craving a burger right now. And poking fun of the restaurant's band, they retire to their cottage to make love and talk about their plans of maybe having a happy accident child until Amanda starts getting what seem to be routine migraines, which the following Monday result in her falling unconscious during her work as a teacher at the local elementary school. Michael finds out when he's called at work that something happened to his wife, and at the hospital, he discovers that Amanda has a brain tumor and has fallen into an irreversible coma, which likely means that she is experiencing or very close to experiencing brain death. But a kind doctor recommends him to Rivermind, which is a trial phase miraculous company working on a cure for brain damage. Their representative, played brilliantly by Tracy Ellis Ross, tells Michael the therapy includes backing up Amanda's entire self into a cloud, then removing the tumor and inserting a fake piece of brain that would be loaded with her memories, making her the same that she was before. And when he wonders if that actually works, she tells him that she's living proof. And she is the same as she was before. Sure, she's sleeping a lot more and more and more every day, but she's told that that's a common side effect. They could absolutely live with that for a while. Out of nowhere, though, Amanda starts going dead behind the eyes, reciting scripted tidbits of advertisement like how they should try Espresso Grande, a brand of coffee that roasts the beans slow and long for a richer, smoother taste. Or telling her elementary school students about Honey Nugs, whole grain chunk cereal covered in golden Talipo honey, the sweetest way to start your day. Unfortunately, Amanda has no idea she's voicing these ads as she's not conscious when they come out of her mouth. So when she tells a little boy whose mother is trying to get them safely away from his abusive father that they should go visit ChristHeart.com, a Christian family-based counseling website that aims to keep families together no matter what the circumstances, she doesn't even remember it, which gets her in serious trouble with the principal of her school, although it also doesn't help that she recommends the principal sign up for Silver Swans, a dating site for those over 50, even though the principal's 49. That's when Michael and Amanda find out that Rivermind has a new exciting tier, Rivermind Plus, that comes with no ads and the ability to travel outside of the country, since their package, Rivermind Common, has now become obsolete. And if they wish to upgrade, they'd have to fork up another $500 a month on top of their subscription fee of $300, which would make it a total of $800 a month. While all of this is happening, we have two important bits of commentary happening in the background. One, the reminder that teachers and manual laborers do not make nearly enough money to afford their life, much less nearly enough money to make up for how vital and dangerous their jobs are. And two, how the gig economy, represented by Michael's coworkers' obsession with the online gambling site Dumb Dummies, which forces desperate people to continuously do more dangerous things to themselves for money, has turned the average worker into a monkey that dances and humiliates itself for spare change. And that's when the episode takes the expected turn. Michael, willing to do whatever it takes to make sure that his beloved wife stays alive, signs up for Dumb Dummies with a bunny mask and starts doing increasingly more disturbing things to himself in order to afford his wife's treatment, resulting in his coworkers finding out and mocking him and a fight breaking between them, which ends up with Mike fired and his coworker maimed or dead, most likely. From this point on, there's no way out. Not only has Rivermind introduced a new subscription tier, Rivermind Lux, which comes with the ability to heighten their senses and acquire new abilities, seeing and experiencing the world like never before, but they can no longer afford to pay for even the most basic of subscriptions, leading to Michael going back to Dumb Dummies for money so they can survive. In the final few minutes of the episode, we see a tired Michael wake up his wife after selling the crib she once bought for their baby to a couple that intends on burning it for a video, leading to Michael revealing a toothless grin as he laughs, implying he's been ripping out teeth to pay the bills. It is, again, June 5th, the date of their anniversary, and Michael has a surprise for his wife. He tells her that he bought her 30 minutes of Rivermind Lux, likely all that he could afford, so she enjoys a bit of serenity. She hears the birds and feels the breeze on her skin, then tells Michael that it's finally time, to which he disagrees, but she insists. She tells him to do it after I'm gone, and we accompany Michael as he brings her up and smothers her to death with a pillow in their shared bedroom. Then locking himself up in his study with a computer and a box cutter, ready to do whatever he has to do. Common People brings out many reflections to what lengths would we go to save those we love. How can we sit around and cheer human depravity and humiliation done as a desperate attempt to keep themselves and their loved ones alive? But most importantly, Common People reminds us that Michael and Amanda really are common people. Like 99.9% of the population, they work menial jobs that pay very little and live modestly, but their love gets them through it all. And like 99.9% of the population, one singular hospital bill would be enough to completely ruin their lives. Common People makes a blatant mockery of the healthcare system, the American one, that is, the greed that leads corporations to force their poor into debt or death so themselves and their loved ones can survive. Not live, but survive. The healthcare system that scams and murders without consequence, that forces mothers to pay hundreds of thousands of dollars to meet their babies and diabetic people to choose between heating their homes or getting insulin. The healthcare system that pulled the trigger of Luigi Mangiani's gun and now wishes for him to die as punishment for his rebellion. It is imperative that this episode was set in a world that looks so similar to our own, unlike others like Nosedive or USS Callister that seem so far removed we have no choice but to see them as entertainment, traditional sci-fi spoofs. But Common People depends on the greediness of reality of the everyday worker to make its points. Of course, one could say that we shouldn't require expensive series made by gigantic corporations to tell us the reality of existing under a capitalist society, but we must remember that art is what survives. After we are all gone, art is what will speak for us, what will tell our stories, and this story is one so incredibly common that it needs to be told 1 million times over until the system either changes or it's brought to its knees by the common people. Common People was the first episode that I watch of the new season, as I watch them all in order, and I think it stands out as such a beautiful, beautiful episode. And after watching the entire season, it's very difficult to not rate it higher than possibly most Black Mirror episodes in general, not just those of this season, because it actually says so much in such a short period of time. And I think it says things that we really needed to hear. Episode 2, Bit Noir. What if you could change everything? In the second episode of the new season of Black Mirror, we are introduced to Maria, a food researcher at a company named Dita, who seems to have a wonderfully ordinary life. She has a partner, a job that she loves, and seems to hit it off pretty well with her coworkers. During a focus group, which Maria watches from behind a two-way mirror, a familiar face from her high school years, Verity, shows up slightly late but convinces everyone that the miso jam candy bar Maria has developed does actually taste wonderful. They then meet casually in the bathroom moments later, and Verity tells Maria she's planning on applying for a position at Dita, which Maria didn't even know was open. At home, Maria talks to her boyfriend about how odd Verity was in high school. She was shy and reserved and spent her entire free time at a computer lab, making up the computers she'd like to build one day. Maria's boyfriend replies that she seems cool, but Maria then tells him there was a nasty rumor about Verity going around, which said that she touched their teacher, Mr. Kendrick, in the lab, but that Maria herself never really believed it to be true, even if Verity made herself easy pickings by being weird, which every single one of us is guilty of being, I myself included, and I was even weirder in high school. So mixed with the rumor, all of that earned her the nickname Milkmaid. Back at work, we are treated to yet another background discussion as one of Maria's coworkers, Louisa, is having to buy more almond milk because someone constantly drinks it all. She's the only vegan in the office, so that's the only milk that she can have. But Maria seems more interested in Verity's interview with Gabe, the boss, where we learn Verity has a degree on molecular biochemistry from Cambridge and studied catering at Oxford Brookes. Also, she scuba dives since the age of 12, which seemed absolutely impossible to me. But then I googled it and I found out that the minimum age for scuba diving is 10 years old. The minimum age for that, there's no reason why it should be that low. I genuinely feel like we should change that. I don't know. I know that it's not an important issue, but we should definitely change that. Unsurprisingly, Verity gets the job, and as more and more oddities start happening around her, Maria knows Verity must be doing something, or many things, to make Maria sound insane and cause her coworkers to doubt her. Finally, near the end of the episode, Maria's fired after Verity accuses her and somehow manages to doctor security cam footage to show that Maria is actually the one who's been drinking Julia's almond milk, which is strange since Maria has a nut allergy. Except nut allergies are not a real thing that exist in this universe anymore. Suddenly. Fed up, Maria connects the dots and realizes Verity's necklace, which she holds on to like a fidget toy every time she's under stress. I do too. Must be the tool Verity is using to change the course of events, and she breaks into Verity's home, finding a strange painting of her as a goddess with two men by her side. Big mood. As well as pictures of her as the cover of Vogue and posing next to Harry Styles and as an astronaut. Verity then reveals it all. The necklace is not the actual agent that changes the timelines, but is connected to a quantum computer built by Verity that uses its frequencies to change the reality to one of many parallel realities that exist. And as there are infinite realities and timelines, Verity simply chooses the one where Maria is the only one who knows what's going on, and the only one who notices the changes, leading her into almost complete insanity, which is the entire point here, of course. A fight breaks out between them, and Verity tells the computer that there are cops outside, called by Maria's boyfriend after she left the house in disarray with a knife and said that she was going to break into Verity's home. But before the cops can get her, Maria steals a gun and shoots Verity straight in the face, which blows the entire side of her face off. It's incredible. The special effects this season, mwah. You know what I mean? And after the shootout, she manages to get to the pendant and use Verity's still warm fingerprints to transfer control of the quantum computer to herself, and immediately skips into a timeline where she is the Empress of the universe, setting the precedent that maybe she and Verity are not that different people, and she will go down the exact same path, enjoying every single alternative timeline where she is the most supreme, smartest being ever, until she comes back to make Verity's life a living fucking hell. I will say, unfortunately, this episode didn't hit hard for me, although I do love classic elements of sci-fi, like messing with timelines and one sole human being being capable of building a quantum computer by herself. That's insane. But as the episode started to cool down in my mind after a rewatch, I began to appreciate it a lot more. The main reason for my new appreciation of the episode is the realization that Verity didn't use her necklace to turn Maria's coworkers against her until the very end, when she doctored the footage to make it look like Maria drank the milk. For the remainder of the episode, Verity actually uses their coworkers' racial bias to turn herself into the soft victim and Maria into the savage aggressor. And everything in the episode is actually built around the knowledge that due to Verity's position as a white woman, she's a much more believable victim than Maria, which we come to revisit as Maria admits to have started the rumor about Verity to get their own deceased schoolmate and former friend of Maria's, Natalie, off her back. Natalie then ends up being the one who blames Maria for the rumor and tells Verity that it was all her idea. It's apparent from their high school pictures as well that Natalie, the blonde, blue-eyed girl, was actually the ringleader of their group and not Maria. Verity's presentation at the office also plays into that notion. She wears a lot of soft fabrics and light colors like pink, white, and yellow, a stark contrast to Maria's darker colored denim outfits. But the most obvious show of the way Verity uses her whiteness in contrast to Maria's blackness is when she truly makes Maria question her reality mid-episode. When the two of them are at their boss's office to discuss what an alleged email said, and Maria explaining her side of the story in a matter-of-fact way, albeit dry and straight to the point, calm and collected, something she's surely had to practice and do a lot in her life as a black woman and seemingly one of only two black women in her office. But Verity turns things around by crying, nervously fidgeting with her necklace, and asking Maria to stop shouting, to which their boss agrees she is, and also out of line. And that actually ends up making her angry, as I think it would most of us. At the end, their entire office jumps at the opportunity to care for and defend a person they met less than a week ago over a coworker that's been with them for 3 years and has never given them reason to question her moral code, even if some, like Nick, believe Maria to be too strong-headed and opinionated, to very obvious microaggressions. This episode, albeit weak compared to others from the Black Mirror franchise, resonated with me, both as a woman of color and a victim of relentless harassment and bullying, both physical and emotional and verbal, all throughout high school and even at work. I can truly understand where Verity is coming from, as I have also fantasized about making those who have wronged me to the point of intensive therapy pay for what they've done. And I'd be lying if I said I hadn't thought of things much worse than simply driving them insane. But as a black woman, I can also sympathize with Maria. I can see how wonderful of a professional she is, how she truly understands and loves her field. And I know just how exhausting it can be to be a black woman in any field and having to constantly tune yourself down and make yourself smaller as to not be seen as deserving of harassment, while also having to work 3, 4, 5 times harder than everyone around you to prove that you actually deserve to be there. But you can't do it proudly, otherwise people are going to think that you're a fucking bitch. As for the title, Bête Noire is an expression meaning someone one truly dislikes, which could be seen from the perspective of both protagonists, Verity, as she spent her entire life hating those who've wronged her, but has also been at the receiving end of hatred in school, and Maria, since her arc is dependent on both hating Verity and being hated by others. However, this expression is of French origin, and they're not exactly known for being welcoming to foreigners. So I definitely think there is a layer of racial prejudice embedded into that title, because it literally translates to Black Beast, right? And finally, the undertones of racial prejudice and racial purity come full circle with the episode's obsession with milk. Both because almond is the type of milk a liberal sort of crowd would be attracted to, bringing to attention how their office pretends to be politically correct on the surface, but still are very quick to turn their backs on a Black woman they've worked with for years, and with its association both in real life through extremist right-wing groups and in the universe of Black Mirror through their character Robert Daly in USS Callister, who drinks milk while gaming and is portrayed as an overall bigot who subjugates women and people of color into roles of servitude. So yeah, this episode at first kind of came out as a silly little revenge fantasy to me, and I definitely liked it because it was a revenge fantasy, but I didn't think about it too much until I rewatched it and I was like, oh, I've been there. I definitely have. I don't like that I have, but I have been there. So yeah, let's keep going. But this episode, genuinely, I feel like it hits so much harder the second time, also because of the elements of sci-fi that are in it are super fun and kind of feel like something that you would see in a sci-fi movie, like just messing with the timeline and like one singular teenager building a quantum computer. And of course we have the added layer that I thought was coming out, which is that it wasn't a rumor at all and Verity was actually being taken like advantage of sexually by the professor. But Verity says that Mr. Kendrick actually was her only friend, the only person who understood her and treated her with kindness and respect. And after the rumors started going around, he was forced to leave their school. So clearly there was no like foul play there. She just needed a friend, and he was the only friend that she ever had. It's very sad, honestly. Been there, but very sad. Episode 3, Hotel Reverie. That's the episode's name. It's not San Junipero, although it really tries to be. Let's get into it. What if your greatest love could never be yours at all? Exactly halfway through the season, we have Hotel Reverie, this sweet little love story. It's definitely a love letter to anyone who adores the classics, like myself. I don't know if you can tell, but I've watched a lot of older movies, okay? Hotel Reverie tells the story of Brandy Friday, who is a famous A-list actress who earned her accolades through a series of love interest roles, but who feels creatively unfulfilled in her life, arguing with her agent that she no longer wishes to play a secondary role to a man, but wants a real character with agency, a character that charms instead of being charmed, unlike her typecast roles of the noble victim, which have earned her Sundance acclaim, or the fuckable sidekick, which are clearly blockbusters, where she is nothing but the Bond girl. She cites movies like Casablanca and Brief Encounter, longing for a true romance, and also mentions the in-universe movie that the episode takes its title from, Hotel Reverie, quoting its famous line, "I'll be yours forevermore," which is seemingly an iconic line that is so famous that people are more familiar with that line than where it comes from. Brandy's agent finds that odd, as he's just received news from Streamberry, the company responsible for Joan is Awful, you remember Joan is Awful? Wow. Little Easter egg. That there will be a reboot of the classic film, which happens to be one of Brandy's favorites. And that the original production company, Keyworth Pictures, a very English name indeed, is looking for an A-list actor for the main role of Dr. Alex Palmer. On the other side of the pond, in the UK, Keyworth Pictures executive Judith Keyworth, who is the daughter of the founder of the company, is visited by Kimmy, a representative of the tech company Redream, which I initially read as Red Ream, because my brain couldn't compute that it was Redream until they actually said it out loud, which aims to revolutionize filmmaking through an ultra-immersive technology. Kimmy proposes to Judith, who hasn't had a real hit for Keyworth Pictures since the 1950s, that they remake their most famous product, Hotel Reverie. with the Redream technology and being assured that it will not be an expensive product. Judith accepts, even if Kimmy's naming of the Heritage movie as content makes her cringe. It makes me cringe too. Stories become one once Kimmy and Judith being let down by A-list actors like both Ryans, Gosling and Reynolds, Timothy Chalamet, Chris Hemsworth, and Donald Glover, none of which would be ideal for a movie of this caliber, by the way, exposing both Kimmy and Judith's desire to simply make money at any cost by casting whoever's most popular at the moment. And I would say White Boy of the Month, but they throw Donald Glover in there as if I wouldn't notice that it's essentially just White Boy of the Month. You know? They hear that Brandy's interested in the main role of Dr. Alex Palmer, suggesting that they gender bend the main character for her, which they immediately accept since Kimmy is a big fan of Brandy's, and one of the few people that actually watched her off-Broadway play named Zodiac Suite a long time ago, apparently, like before she was a big deal. Brandy's hired, and she instantly goes searching for behind-the-scenes footage of Hotel Reverie, ending on a screen test by Dorothy Chambers, the actress who played the love interest in the movie, where she pretends to speak on a telephone, stopping to laugh about how odd that feels when there's no one at the other end of the line. Keep that in mind for the ending. She watches the screen tests and the trailer and little tidbits like the best moments of the movie until she comes across a newsreel from what seems to be the late 1940s or early 1950s, which explained that Dorothy took her own life with the aid of sleeping pills in her mansion where she was found hours later. And she was never married and didn't leave anyone behind, but was constantly in turmoil due to the gossip surrounding her personal life, which calls back to the fact that Brandy herself finds herself in the same position. A week goes by with Brandy having received a package in the mail containing the script and copy of Hotel Reverie, but failing to notice there was an USB stick that contained the most important information that she needed to know, with her having to then hear from Kimmy in a very rushed explanation how the technology she's about to be immersed in works. So let's get into it because it's silly, but I actually like it when sci-fi explains how the world works. What we learn is Redream is a system that invents a movie and all of its surrounding material, meaning screenplay, casting reels, and the like, and creates an entirely self-sufficient fictive dimension in which Brandy will be fully immersed into, meaning nobody in that reality will know anything the story doesn't wish us for them to know, that the story didn't originally write down. And they will believe to be real people going through a real situation, with only Brandy being self-aware that she's an actress in a movie. This happens because they essentially took the entire movie and copied it into the system of Redream, giving like all of the characters their personalities based on their characters, like not based on the actors, but based on their characters. So they copied the personality of each individual character into the movie to make it more realistic, so they will say their lines and be able to improvise, but they are still characters. They would never say something that would go against their worldview. They would never know something that would not have been originally already in the movie. Do you get it? It's a little bit silly, but she's then transported into the movie with the help of something Kimmy calls a mesmerizer, which is a round little white circle that attaches to the temples, which we have seen before and we will see again in this season. We see that a lot in this season. And Brandy cannot at first comprehend how incredibly realistic the universe she now is in is. With Kimmy being like, yeah, you're gonna get used to it, okay, but you gotta do it fast because we gotta roll the opening title. So you have until the opening title to get used to the way that things are. So initially, all of the characters around her are static because they need the opening title to be able to move and become real people who say their lines. But Brandy does see everything in black and white because she is in black and white, but none of the characters will be able to question why a black woman would be a male doctor in the 1940s, because they were not programmed to even realize the difference between skin tones, since there are no black characters in this movie. The darker we get is a seemingly racist portrayal of a Middle Eastern man who is trying, well, Middle Eastern, African man, who is trying to help the antagonists, well, the secondary character's husband, Claude, kill her. That's the plot of the movie, by the way. The plot of the Hotel Reverie is that there's this lady named Clara who goes to Egypt with her husband, and her husband, Claude, is plotting to kill her because he wants to inherit all of her father's money. So he takes her to Egypt and plots with a bunch of like workers of the hotel that he wants to kill her, and promises them money, I'm guessing. And then you have the main character, who is Dr. Alex Palmer, who finds out about the conspiracy against Clara and saves her. The only character that has actually been programmed to be slightly more fleshed out is actually Clara herself, Dorothy Chambers, who, despite Brandy forgetting lines and being unable to play the piano, horrid scene, ends up building a genuine emotional connection to Brandy's Dr. Palmer, with their chemistry being even stronger than it was between Clara and the original lead, something a tech assistant explains might have something to do with Dorothy drawing so much from her personal life to build the character of Clara, like her pain and her sorrow and feeling othered by the world, which is incremented by her sins and those of her character. So Clara has, and I mean sin in the sense of like the 1940s. We'll get to it. So Clara has an extra dimension than other characters. She develops an extra dimension because she's AI and she's able to evolve on her own. As the computers were able to like access that angle of her, an explanation, it doesn't make any sense to me personally, because if she drew like on her personal life to create the character, that would imply that nobody else that was in the movie drew from personal life to, I don't care, honestly. Clara adds new information to her story by stating she doesn't enjoy being teased, as that is something that she endured in school, something that she clearly drew from personal life and personal experience, and it was originally not in the script. And she walks away from Brandy, the actress, making a fatal mistake by calling Clara by her real name, Dorothy, which seems to awaken something in Clara. And she asks Brandy, "Why did you call me by that name?" To which Brandy replies that Clara reminds her of a friend that she has named Dorothy, who had a very difficult life and a very sad, sorrowful nature to her. Clara understands why she would be reminded of her friend Dorothy when Brandy looks at Clara, because Clara is dealing with a lot of things inside of her, both as the character and as the actress Dorothy Chambers. And as the story progresses, the two women's chemistry is off the charts, and the tech engineers discover they won't be able to reset or end the simulation until the end credits, which will be rolled when Brandy repeats Clara's iconic line after the climax of the movie. I don't really get why they have to wait until the end for her to say, "I'll be yours forevermore." Wouldn't she be able to just say it whenever? Or does she only need to does she need to say it to Clara specifically at that moment specifically for it to roll the end credit? I don't know. However, for that to happen, they need to find a way to circumvent the plot holes that were created by Brandy when she decided to chuck Clara's poisoned drink to the floor, something that becomes even harder when one of the engineers, distracted by the steamy kiss between Clara and Brandy, bumps into the table and dumps his coffee all over his CPU, causing the simulation to abruptly pause. The coffee has been referenced before when Kimmy was walking into the studio and was like, "Hey, that was a you rule. You said that you couldn't have coffee because it was a hazard. So take the coffee away." And he doesn't take the coffee away, and then the coffee dumps over the CPU. So it causes the entire world to freeze, except for Clara and Brandy. Here, the story kind of pivots. Clara and Brandy argue, and Clara finds out the truth about her non-existence. And we are left, much like with their sister episode, Sandra Napera, to question what really is existence and how real can a sentient AI be if it believes itself to be real. After the argument, Clara becomes enlightened about her situation by slipping into a void caused by the fact her worldview was never thought of behind what's on the screen, which allows her to access the database collected on Dorothy Chambers. Why they collected it? I don't know. Making her hyper-aware of her human counterpart's life and her demise, accessing the memories of Dorothy's affair with a production worker in Hotel Reverie, and her sadness as to not being able to live the life she wanted with her love again. How she's able to access the memories of Dorothy escapes me, but I'm assuming that it has something to do with the gossip related to her sexuality, which was very common at the time for people to gossip about the sexuality of actors and actresses, and Hollywood was known for being like a den of sin and horrid things happening, big sacrifices and Satanism and gay people, not the gay people. So a lot of people were like speculated about the lives of these actors back in the day. So I'm guessing that's where she's drawing from and not the actual literal memories, but she sees the literal memories of Clara having an affair with someone that worked in the production. So I don't know. From here, we watch as Clara and Brandy fall in love through the course of several months and vow their love to each other. Not as Clara and Dr. Palmer, but as Dorothy and Brandy. But all of this is taken away from both of them, two women who have never been allowed to love out loud, when the CPU gets up and running and they reset Clara's memory, allegedly, taking away all the time she and Brandy had together. I say allegedly because I am not 100% sure that it was taken away from Clara, and even if it was, the feeling that she has towards Brandy persists, as exemplified by the end of the movie Hotel Reverie. So I don't genuinely think that it was taken away from her. I think she was just acting. The climax of the film ends up with Brandy getting into a fight with Clara's husband, Claude, which wasn't supposed to happen, and before the police can get there, Clara takes agency over her own story by shooting her husband, and one of the police officers, who really said ACAB, solidifying herself as the real protagonist of Hotel Reverie. She basically shoots a man who didn't even need to be shot, by the way. She just shoots the first person that she sees in front of her, who is the detective. And she's gunned down by the officers and dies in the arms of her beloved. They whisper their love to one another, and Brandy says the iconic line, "I'll be yours forevermore," as a response for Clara's plea that Brandy not forget her. And she never will. The film is an instant success, which is honestly the most fictional part of this. It's insane that this film actually made any money. But Brandy still returns home to her empty mansion on 2041 Junipero Drive in California, devoid of warmth and with no one to love, until she finds a gift package from Kimmy, which states that she had one of the tech engineers cook up something for Brandy in the form of an interactive AI version of Dorothy Chambers' screen test that allows Brandy to communicate with a version of the real Dorothy, not Clara, not the person that she was acting with, through a little telephone that she also sends back. It's a very bittersweet scene, as this the entirety of the season and the entirety of Black Mirror, right? Like, there's a cute thing about it, but when you get to thinking, it's not cute anymore. It's just sad. Gay people can never win, apparently. And don't tell me San Junipero's gay people winning. It's not. They're both dead. It's not winning. Okay, I took a little pee break because I have a very annoying bladder that has the worst timing in the world. But back. Much like its predecessor, San Junipero, Hotel Reverie ends with a plot that cannot be fully described as optimistic, but leaves the watcher wondering if an artificial version of happiness is all that we can hope for, right? In this episode, there is a chance that talking to her first love will incentivize Brandy to seek a real connection. Perhaps even Dorothy herself will draw from her own life and encourage Brandy to not meet the same fate. But as we've seen with the introduction of AI tools like ChatGPT and Gemini, human beings are currently facing a world where we are deprived of third spaces to connect with each other in the real world. And that is causing us to become more and more isolated from one another, losing our touch with reality and the thing that separates it from ones and zeros on a screen, which is our humanity. If you're a regular user of the former Twitter, which is now known as X, you'd notice we've often come across touch-deprived people with no means of accessing mental health services now relying on artificial intelligence to give them advice or act as a companion. A step further from the wave of initial teenagers being trained to use AI as a search tool and falling for misinformation, both of which are actually really dangerous, but a reliance on AI as a way to fill the void left by human connection and our inability to confide on one another might lead to something even more sinister, which is regular people training artificial intelligence to act human, leading to tech companies using the gathered data to further immerse people into a state of numb compliance. I don't actually believe that we are going to evolve AI enough that it one day will start evolving on its own and take over the world or whatever, like make us slaves. That's not what I mean. But we are giving companies a lot more information on us than they have ever had. We're giving marketing companies and tech companies a lot more information on us and our lives and our opinions and how to trick us, a lot more information than they ever had. And they will use that information for evil. They will use that information to continue to destroy the planet, to continue to trick us until there's nothing left. That is the fear. I don't think that the future will look like, Megan, where there's like an artificial intelligence that like kills a bunch of people. I think the future will look something more like Metalhead, the Black Mirror episode, where literal AI robots are trained to now kill humans because that's what they were made for. Not because they want to kill humans, but because they are a failed experiment by a human. That seems like a lot more plausible to me. It's easy to see how that could be Brandy's ending, all alone in a big house, looking for less and less motive to leave every single day, and now, thanks to Redream, able to shoot an entire movie in just 3 to 5 hours, which would devalue art as we know it and turn artists obsolete in the eyes of the masses, a cultural shift we are already witnessing. Brandy could end up all alone, never leaving her home thanks to Redream and food delivery apps, only enamored with a woman she can never have. A woman who doesn't exist if she ever did. Black Mirror hasn't really been the first sci-fi piece to question the lines between humanity and machine and how realistic a depiction it would take for humans to consider a machine to be an equal, to be deserving of the same rights. But this episode brings out many other questions in regards to the already precarious-looking future of filmmaking and about how ethical is Brandy's ownership of fake Dorothy. If she is indeed deserving of the moniker after all. She knows and feels she's been loaded with the essence of Dorothy, and if she's unable to mimic the real version, which we would never know as she's been dead for many years, would her ability to love and respond to her environment not make her her own person? And would Dorothy, who killed herself out of fear of the speculation over her life and the knowledge she might never have the life that she wants, approve of a copy of herself forever kept in a computer to entertain a lonely actress? Would that copy of Dorothy ever yearn for freedom, for a body of her own and a chance to see the world? Something that she could never have. And what would happen to that copy when she starts questioning her reality? What would Brandy do? It is clear where the likes of Judith Keyworth, Redream, and Kimmy stand on this. They repeat over and over to Brandy that Clara is not real. Her feelings are not real. She's just code. She's just AI. But they have never been in the position that Brandy has been. And perhaps with a more sexually appropriate copy of a famous live or deceased celebrity, they too would change their minds on the subject. Hotel Reverie leaves us with the age-old question: what happens when creation kills God and becomes creator? What kind of God would we be if we were in charge of our own evolution? It seems every day we are closer and closer to the real answer to these horrid questions. As for the title, reverie is an English word from Old French which means madness, but that is now supposed to mean daydream or a state of being pleasantly lost in thought. Speaking to the dreamlike state in which the characters of the hotel exist in, as they were once actors playing a role but are now stuck in a permanent limbo, not knowing how limited their world truly is. It also speaks of Clara, who was once stuck in the same state of daydream but was awakened by Brandy, who for a moment seemed about to choose the same life, free of worry and a perpetual bliss, where she could spend eternity in a daydream with her beloved. As we finish the episode, it is worth wondering whether Dorothy Chambers' so seemed kind and welcoming words towards Brandy at the phone will also be stuck in a perpetual daydream, as her whole world seems to be limited to Brandy's computer screen, locking Brandy into her own bliss by giving her a dreamlike escape from the real world. Overall, it is a pretty solid episode, and compared to the two previous ones, I would place it just below Common People, both in terms of writing and execution and the stellar production and cinematography. Where it loses points, though, is in Issa Rae's poor acting. But Emma Corrin picks up the skills that she lacks and tells us that perhaps people are a bit blind as to what roles they're able to play, even if they really want to. Since Brandy invests in Hotel Reverie to have a shot at a complex male main role, but ends up antagonized by the true star of the film, both in universe and in real life, as we are watching the episode. Episode 4. Plaything. What if you could fix everything? For its 4th episode of the new season, Black Mirror brings us back into the world of Bandersnatch, their only interactive episode to date, by reintroducing Will Poulter's Colin Rittman, the genius mind behind the video game Bandersnatch, who worked for Tuckersoft before losing his mind years ago and disappearing from public life completely. If you, like me, could never get an ending on Bandersnatch that didn't end up with Colin dying in one way or the other, likely by being bashed on the head by Stefan upon Colin's request, or jumping off of a balcony, you might have also been a little confused at first, but we must remember the very thesis of Bandersnatch is how multiple realities and timelines can coexist, and that they may converge once you make a simple or complicated decision. But out there, in the vastness of the universe, infinite versions of you also exist. A thesis that is solidified by the episode Bête Noire, where we get to see just how a morally corrupt person would be able to mess with time. Plaything, we follow Cameron Walker through 2 phases of his life. Initially, an old man who is caught in the near future after attempting to rob a liquor store and immediately taken into custody as the police finds out he's a suspect to a high-profile murder case. Then, as a younger version of himself, as he's detained and telling his wife's story, seemingly embellished by the stereotypical true crime murderer backstory, to a short, fused detective and a caring psychoanalyst sent to determine if his actions might have been influenced by mental illness, something that seems apparent to the analyst since she's been told Walker keeps asking repeatedly for pen and paper to draw something. That he just really wants pen and paper. Like, he's very interested in the pen and paper. After he bullshits his way through the alcoholic mother and physically abused father's sob story, and noting how the state facility that he's in is home to a mega computer much more advanced than anything regular people would have access to, Mr. Walker moves forward to the year of 1994, explaining that he was once a video game reviewer who was invited by Colin Rittman himself to test out a new game. Upon arriving at Tuckersoft, however, he finds out from a seemingly recovered Colin, at least on the surface, who is now dependent on medication to stay lucid, that the game being developed, Thronglets, isn't really a game at all, but a complicated series of code that developed the first creatures in the world whose biology is entirely digital, making them the first piece of sentient artificial intelligence of his timeline, able to learn, replicate its own code, and evolve all on their own, with the player being required simply to hatch the first eggs and care for the first few Thronglets. And from there on, they take control of the game themselves. Cameron Walker steals the CD copy of Thronglets and takes it to his home, where he becomes enthralled by the little creatures and their sounds, and after a night of doing acid with an acquaintance by the name of Lump, whose real name he alleges he does not know, and who seemed to only take advantage of his need for human connection and passivity, as well as his inability to stand up for himself, he discovers the LSD helps him understand the Throng's language, and that they are indeed attempting to communicate with Walker, which he facilitates by installing a webcam that records the room the computer is in, deciding to then dedicate his life to acquiring more and more technology to help his friends expand their universe and understand ours. But Walker needs to work, and one day after going to the office absolutely high off his mind, he comes home to find out that Lump, the dealer, a representative of all that's rotten, corrupt, and flawed about the human race, has taken to torture his digital friends for fun, dropping rocks on them and setting them on fire. And the poor things, who seemingly can feel real pain, are now hiding behind their rocks, absolutely terrified of the evil man who has killed so many of them. Walker is devastated. Those are his friends, his family. He gets into a fight with Lump, which ends up with Walker choking the drug dealer to death, draining his body, and chopping it up into pieces that are then placed in a suitcase, dropped in the middle of nowhere, to be found later by the police, who have yet to identify the body all these years after the crime. Walker admits he felt bad, not only for what he had done, but for allowing his violent nature to win, and that he only wished to protect his friends and couldn't possibly leave them alone to fall into the hands of someone who might do God knows what with them, a fate made exceptionally worse by the knowledge that Colin Rittman scrapped the Thronglets project, undoubtedly after realizing that what they could imply for the human race, and Walker's copy of the Thronglets is the only one currently in existence. He dedicates the next decades to decoding the Throng language, buying more and more electronics to add to their personal expansion pack, and allowing the Throngle to see inside his mind through a painful procedure done without any anesthetics that seems to solidify to the little creatures that the human race is in dire need of help and salvation, and that with the help of Walker, they can send a signal through a drawing shown to the cameras, kind of like a QR code, that will send all humans who hear it into a deep trance and allow the Throngle to enter their minds and make them part of the collective, creating a world devoid of violence and evil. Somehow. The final shot of the episode shows a beaten and bloody Walker, now an old man at the police station, putting his hand out in an act of kindness and solidarity for the barely conscious Detective Kano, who is now a part of the Throngle family. Yay for the Thronglets! They're very cute. They're very cute, the Thronglets. I'm sure that's by design. Plaything touches on many subjects, and I do not believe it gives us an actual answer as to what it is trying to say, likely because it says many things at once. The main thesis of the episode seems to be on the inherent evil and uncontrollable desire for violence present in the human race, as seen from the perspective of the characters who have never known anything but violence and therefore serve as unreliable narrators. First, we have Walker, who, if his childhood story is to be believed, comes from an abusive home where he was physically and emotionally beaten and didn't have a much better time at school, being easy pickings due to his passive nature and trauma turning him into a social pariah. Walker seems to have some sort of psychological, illness that prevents him from truly trusting people and leaves him in a state of depressive anxiety, with the only people he can call his friends being his boss and a man who uses him for a place to crash when he's in town to, sell drugs. Great friends you have. All Walker has ever known is abuse, and he came of age at a time where the world was enthralled in the consequences of World War II, the last remnants of the space race, and the Vietnam War, a possible reason behind his father's violence. Then we have Lump, a drug dealer who we know nothing about except for his propensity for violence and delight in hurting those who are smaller and weaker than him, likely resulting from a lesson that he had to learn to become a dealer, and likely because he comes from an impoverished background, which would have led to him becoming a dealer. Thirdly, we have Detective Kano, a hard-headed, unprofessional cop who allows his emotions to get the best of him and uses methods of intimidation and violence to extract a confession out of Walker. And finally, the Throngle. These little creatures have only truly known two people: Lump, who tortured them, and Walker, who initially loved them, but then proved to be as dangerous as Lump, with their worldview being skewed by those two experiences and their having been developed by humans, making them as flawed as we are. That's a major theme of Black Mirror. The fact that human beings are flawed, and therefore all that we produce will be flawed and will reflect our personality, just like we are supposed to reflect the personality of God and be made in his image. Interestingly, with the exception of the genderless Throngle, every other violent person introduced in the episode is a man. And when Walker talks about the evils committed by humanity, he's largely referencing crimes committed by men, like 9/11, the World Wars, and such. The only kind character in the episode who seems to genuinely be interested in what Walker has to say, to her benefit or not, and who treats him with respect and even provides him with the pen and paper that he wanted so desperately, which ends up being the damnation of humanity, is a woman, leading us back to the question of it. If the Throngle genuinely had access to all files of humanity and was able to see what we have done without bias, not through the eyes of Walker, good and bad, not just bad, would it not have been able to identify patterns in relation to culture and gender? Having been created by a human being in the 90s, even with the knowledge that they are self-evolving, would they not still have been able to develop a bias, or have a bias implanted onto them by a tech-savvy person like Walker or Colin? Or did the Throngle simply believe that because of the harm committed by some of the human race, that all of us deserve to die and have our free will taken away from us? And if that's the case, could we really trust them to be as benevolent as Walker believes them to be? Or is Walker simply sacrificing the human race because he has completely given himself up to nihilism and lost all faith in humanity? Those are the questions that we are left with by the end of the episode. Questions that seem to be largely left unanswered, but that point to, as it seems to be a theme this season, is the dangers of letting AI into one's home and to trust it as if it's your friend. Because you shouldn't do that. You shouldn't do that. If you take anything from this video, you shouldn't do that. Episode 5. Eulogy. What if you could apologize and say goodbye properly? One episode from the end of the season, Black Mirror hits us with a gut-punching exploration of life, loss, and love through the episode Eulogy, which had already been hyped up to be the gem of the season due to the involvement of Paul Giamatti. And in a season packed with such interesting, profound stories, Eulogy manages to stand out completely from the rest. In this episode, we meet Philip, an older man living by himself in Cape Cod, Massachusetts, who receives a call from a company named Eulogy, which specializes in using artificial intelligence to curate unique, immersive memorials, that being how he learns that Carol Royce, once Carol Hartman, has passed away, and that her daughter, Callie Royce, has hired Eulogy to help her organize her mother's funeral. Philip is taken aback, but he agrees, and he instantly receives a package delivered by a drone, the first piece of high-tech we see in the episode, which contains a small device called a guide disc that is supposed to be placed, you guessed it, on the temple, and will assist him in collecting memories of Carol. Philip is incredibly skeptical, as he hasn't thought of Carol in a long time, burying her in the depths of his mind and labeling her a cruel, insensitive woman who did nothing but hurt him in order to cope with his pain. Raise your hand if you have been also called a cruel, insensitive woman who is a horrible person by a man who is worse than you. Anyway, he's incredibly dismissive at first, telling the AI to skip the guide and go directly to the point, but try as he might, he cannot remember Carol's face or her features, and the guide won't help him as it could interfere with his memories of her. That's when the device suggests to look for pictures of her, as he doesn't have any digital ones due to the fact that he and Carol knew each other before the digital age. He digs through his cellar to find old photos from the time they knew each other. The first photo takes us back to 1989, when Carol and Philip were living at the Coop, a squatter co-op community of artists and freethinkers in Brooklyn. Unfortunately, she doesn't have a face in the photo as her back is turned to the camera, but we can see by the way that young Philip is looking at her that he is already attracted to her. The guide suggests they enter the picture, which can be achieved with the help of the guide disc that he put on his, and upon entering the photo, the guide enhances the image to note that Carol had a ring on her finger, suggesting she had been engaged before leaving home, which she never mentioned to him, although she did mention that she was in a relationship. In the second photo, they visit a party thrown at the Coop, but Philip and Carol are nowhere to be seen, with him remembering they were actually down the hall chatting, with Philip being aided by the music playing that night to remember how easy it was to talk to her and how she was unlike any other woman he ever met. She's not like other girls. That, he also says, was the first night that they slept together. Neither picture can be used for the memorial, however, as it paints a bad, picture of the deceased's character or, moral values or whatever. So they go to the third picture. We can't see Carol, but we do see Philip leaning on a door frame, and he states that he was actually listening to Carol play a piece on her beloved cello that she had composed herself. They still cannot see her face or hear the music, and he can't fill the gap that would allow them to, making the door lead to nothing but a vast void. Kind of like the one that we saw in Hotel Reverie. The guide asks Philip if he had other pictures, to which he says yes, but they will not be any help, as it turns out that he has removed her face from every picture that he has ever owned, big mood, by either scratching, cutting, drawing over it, or burning it off as a result of the pain that she caused him. He reveals they were together for 3 years, from 1989 to 1992, and their breakup drove him to alcoholism, which took him 15 years to recover from, meaning she stole, in his mind, at least 18 years of his life, likely more, since he never met anyone that he loved. The fourth picture was taken in Cape Cod, their first vacation together. He states his parents had a house there, undoubtedly the one that he lives in now, and they wanted to get out of the city for a while. They posed together in front of a hot dog statue and asked a passing tourist to take the photo, which annoyed Carol as she remarked that he couldn't even put the beer bottle down for one single picture, implying there was already precedent for his addiction even when he was happy with Carol. He finally states this was the trip that made them realize they were serious. In the fifth picture, Carol is painting blue over a nicotine yellow wall of their first apartment together, a small place over a piano store. She painted the letters C plus P while he took the black and white picture. He remarks that by that time, Carol had already joined their band. The guide becomes curious at that point, so he brings in the sixth picture to explain. He was in a band called The Head, with a man called Zeke, who was the lead singer, and an unnamed man for a drummer. Carol joins the band playing the keyboard, which confuses the guide as she seemingly loved the cello so much that she taught it to her daughter. We also get a tidbit about how Zeke eventually left the band and moved to Seattle, becoming famous. He reveals no recording of their band survived as he can't stand to hear Zeke's voice and deems him an asshole, further proof of his ability to hold grudges against those he believes wronged him for long periods of time, since he also thought their band was good enough that they could have made it big, even if Carol's heart wasn't in it. The guide remarks that perhaps if he had allowed Carol to play the cello for the band, she could have been more committed, which annoys him, making him question who could have coded such a difficult being as them. But the guide responds she wasn't coded, more generated, and when Philip jokes she was generated by a digital asshole, we see the guide's feelings become visibly hurt, and Philip apologizes, showing he's capable of recognizing his mistake, at least on a small scale, and regret them. Seventh picture, Halloween 1991. They're at a bar together, called the Undervolt, where Philip used to work. At this time, two faces are burned off, Carol and an unknown man, who Philip identified as a random guy trying his luck with Carol, getting angry since she was allowing this to happen right in front of him, only to have it pointed out that he was also really close to another woman, Emma from the coop, who Carol believed was leading him on, leading them to have a fight that night. The guide also remarks that Carol seemed uncomfortable, seemingly attempting to get away from the Beetlejuice-dressed man next to her, to which Philip retorts she could have gotten away from him if she wanted, but she spent all night dancing with him. Another photo soon revealing that wasn't the case, to which he mumbles was just an expression, stating the real reason behind Carol's fight with Philip was that he didn't allow her to get to bed at a reasonable time, as the next day she had an audition for the Brooklyn Philharmonic, which she didn't end up getting. The guide retorts that she must have been really sad, but Philip ignores that and states that she mustn't have been that sad, as it ended up going well for her, since a friend of hers from the coop, Amanda, who was English, went back home and managed to pull some strings to get Carol on the orchestra for the Phantom of the Opera on the West End, which Philip boils down to some terrible tourist bullshit. In London, Carol sent him loads of postcards, which he blackened out with pens, and eventually they come across a picture from his birthday, taken by Emma, which reveals that he cheated on Carol while she was traveling. And although he felt as that it was a stupid mistake that both him and Emma would eventually regret and take to the grave, Carol decides to call him for the first time since she left, wishing to sing him happy birthday from London, something that would have cost her a fortune, he explains, and that's why she never called him. But the call is actually picked up by Emma, which makes them have another fight. The guide gets angry, stating that all his time he has painted Carol as this evil aggressor, but he was just as bad, if not worse, and asking what Carol had done that made her such a horrible human being. So he decides to show her. And frankly, I was not expecting much because this man is so whiny, but what we get is worse than what I was expecting. Apparently, they had planned for him to visit her in London a couple months after his birthday, and the tickets had already been bought. He went, made a reservation at a nice hotel and restaurant, making it explicit to the concierge his intentions to propose to her. Once there, he orders a bottle of champagne, which Carol declines, making him even more nervous. He remarks that she was embarrassed of having gained some weight, but that he didn't notice, and to him she looked perfect. Eventually, he takes out the ring box and places it on the table. But as she goes silent, he demands an answer. And he claims the waitresses were all staring at him, which is likely just something that he made up in his mind, and ends up banging his fists on the table, demanding an answer, which is what attracted the attention of the restaurant and causes Carol to leave, making him feel humiliated, and he insists on paying for the champagne, even if they wanted to cover it for him, because he didn't want their pity. The guide angrily talks about how he didn't need the pity because he had enough of pity for himself. It states that all Philip has done so far was to whine and moan about how Carol ruined his life, how she's the devil incarnate, but not once did he stop to think that she was pregnant with the guide, who is revealed to be an AI version of Carol's daughter. I think we all saw that coming. Kelly, complete with all her memories and personality, that has been tasked with processing all the memories of her mother for the memorial, since that would have been too painful for the real Kelly. Philip is in shock. He asks her why she didn't tell him that before, to which she responds that he chose to ignore the initial guide of the disc. And he asks her about her real father, revealed to be a member of the orchestra with whom her mother had a one-night stand. She says he moved to Manchester by the time that she was born, and she had met him maybe 5 or 6 times in her entire life, with the last one being when he was rambling to her about a rabbit hole conspiracy theory that he found online, and having learned a couple years after that he died of COVID. Finally, the last photo, found in a disposable camera he bought so they could take pictures around London during his trip, shows a destroyed hotel room, a result of Philip's anger towards Carol's rejection of him. He learns through the enhance feature that there was a letter on the floor addressed to him, which he never saw, and desperately attempts to open it. But as it's a simulation, he cannot. However, he remembers that after thrashing the hotel, he went out to drink, coming back to find the maid had neatly arranged all of his mess into a pile that he then shoved into his suitcase and never thought about again. That's when he discovers the letter. He finds out Carol apologized to him, revealing that she had a one-night stand with a coworker and has found out she's pregnant. She repeatedly tells him she loves him and that she intends to keep the baby, but didn't know how he would react to that information, if he would still want her. She asks if he can forgive her and wishes to talk about it, to meet her at the stage door for the next day after the matinee so they can resolve their issues, but that she understands if he cannot forgive her. Overcome by grief, Philip retrieves a cassette tape recorded by Carol for him from that time in 1989 where he used to listen to her play, and listens with Kelly to the original piece composed by her mother. We jump to a few days later. Philip arrives in London to attend the funeral, and he leans against the frame of the church door to watch Kelly play the piece her mother created, finally being able to see her in his mind after all these years, a bright smile on her face, as she catches him staring at her through the door of the coupe. Eulogy is most definitely the strongest episode this season, and one of the strongest ones overall in all of the seasons of Black Mirror. And it reminds me of the time before Black Mirror became American property and utilizing its innocuous sci-fi elements very well. Like, they're not overtly present, they're not glitter and glamour, they're just this little thing that exists in that universe. We have definitely seen a device like the Gaia disc before, especially this season, and the recurrence in the last couple seasons seems to imply that they are a device that we should be paying close attention to. Perhaps because of how similar it is to technology currently in development like Tesla's Neuralink. But the greatest thing about this episode is that it uses a device that could, at least superficially, be considered a non-threatening AI, as it has been developed to help grieving families, much like how many people initially felt towards the Neuralink. And I think a lot of people still feel that way, especially with the kind of fluff pieces that are coming out about it. It is important to remember, though, that even technology developed to heal and help can be twisted into evil, and any watcher of Black Mirror might have felt a chill down their spine at the sight of every human being present at Carol's funeral completely brainwashed by the technology instead of witnessing the beautiful tribute piece performed by her daughter. I'm gonna let my dog out because she can't decide if she wants to be in or out. In fact, Black Mirror's insistence in showing the audience devices that can be connected to the brain by placing it on or in the human skin seem like a loud advert against them, and hopefully we'll see the concept develop enough to become ever more of a presence in the next season, as I believe that to be a very important warning against the current state of technology. Like, I think this is a thing that everyone needs to hear and see. As for the meat of the episode, Eulogy touches on the very human habit of holding grudges, as well as blaming others for one's personal failures. And interestingly, the unreliable narrator of this episode is once again a man, a theme for this season. Philip, albeit overcome by the pain caused by the loss of seemingly the only long-term relationship he's ever had, has allowed himself to shut down all other people who might have attempted to enter his life, losing touch with the co-op entirely and falling into a pit of addiction that he blames Carol for. But we see time and time again that his addictive tendencies, which are often inherited genetically, were present during his relationship with Carol through his inability to let go of alcohol, even during one nice photo, his drinking of an entire bottle of champagne alone, his immediate using of alcohol as a crutch whenever he's angry, and even his work as a bartender. There are a lot of bartenders, apparently, that have issues with alcohol, by the way, and they all drink on the job because drinking is part of the job. Philip is also a violent, manipulative man. He seems to resent Carol for getting a spot at the orchestra pit, acting as if it's beneath a real artist to play for a tourist trap. He seemingly sabotaged her audition for the Philharmonic on purpose or not, still refusing to admit the consequences of his actions and playing it down as not having truly hurt her feelings. He considered the co-op to be made entirely of innocent kids who believed themselves to be real artists but weren't. He resents Zeke, his former bandmate, for abandoning him and coming into success of his own. He deprives Carol from playing the only instrument she ever loved in his band, stating that she was in agreement but later revealing her heart wasn't really in it. He bangs his fist on tables and destroys hotel rooms out of anger. And although not sober when he cheated on Carol, he still downplays it as being just a silly mistake that meant nothing and could be overcome, but she didn't want to overcome it. Not him, she didn't. He accuses her of flirting with a man she seemed uncomfortable around simply because she was sitting next to him, and when he finds out Kelly's father turned out to be a deadbeat, he immediately blames Carol for having bad taste in men. Which is a self-dig, by the way. All of this, combined with his anger and dismissive persona, and the mug we spot next to him in his desk, which leads back to a rehabilitation center that actually exists, prove that Philip has always been an angry, resentful man who disliked anyone he deemed to be more talented than him, or perhaps capable of achieving their dreams when he wasn't. As we never find out what sort of artist he was, but it is heavily hinted at that he was an amateur photographer, which means a place like New York would be the perfect place for him to develop his craft, and Brooklyn in the 90s was like a growing hub for artists, right? Well, it's always been, New York has always been the home of artists, but specifically in like the late 80s and early 90s, which is also where we have the musical Rent, being set, and I hate Rent, but that's a thing that comes to my head. Unfortunately, either for lack of talent or lack of trying, he was unable to pursue his dream as a career, and that is a very competitive field that he chose. So maybe his failure is why he doesn't believe anyone should be able to succeed. Furthermore, it might just be that his flying out to London after such an ugly fight with Carol, with a ring on his jacket pocket, which is an attempt to salvage the relationship by locking her to him forever. And given that he didn't take her job in the West End seriously, it's not difficult to imagine that their engagement would come with the implicit desire for her to return to the States with him, where his alcoholic tendencies would still kick in eventually, as they were already initially present, making it difficult for her to leave that life that she was now stuck in with him. Miserable, but with him. According to her daughter, Carol didn't speak of that point in her life, which Kelly replies cannot simply be because it wasn't meaningful, likely the exact opposite, but her AI version doesn't explicitly state that she forgave him or that his impact on her life was positive. And it is also implied that AI Kelly wasn't programmed to judge or cry. However, she does let out that she or her mother believed that if Philip had known about the pregnancy, the version of him that exists in Carol's story or that AI Kelly was able to witness would simply ask Carol to get rid of her. And I don't doubt it. I don't doubt that he would have said that in anger. Finally, Philip is definitely a sympathetic character. His violent tendencies are almost certainly both a result of his not being able to cope with his own perceived failure and place in society, forced to see everyone else succeed, and a genetic predisposition to addiction, which caused him to lash out at everyone around him, resulting in his being alone in his old age, but his willingness to recognize his mistakes and show up for Carol's funeral, going back to London after all this time to meet the daughter of the only woman he's ever loved, proves that he is capable of change and growth, and we all are, independent of our age. At its core, Eulogy is a story about learning to forgive before it's too late. Although both Philip and Carol demonstrate they are not perfect, none of the things they did to each other were ever violent enough to be impossible to resolve. And they are both capable of growth, as indicated in the final scenes of the episode. If anything, it's implied that Carol didn't die with hate in her heart for Philip, and her one gift to him through Kelly, the child that was produced through cheating, is ensuring that he won't die with hate in his heart either. It's a deeply touching portrayal of human feelings that tugs at the heartstrings and proves that there's good in all of us, and we don't always have to be so easily manipulated by our own feelings, as well as how important it is to reach out and build community. Apart from that, Eulogy proves that the thesis developed by Cameron Walker and Plaything is wrong. There is good in humanity, and we all deserve a chance at finding that good within ourselves, even if it might be too late to make peace with those who have wronged us. We can still make peace with ourselves. And I think that's beautiful. Episode 6. USS Callister into infinity. At 1 hour and 30 minutes runtime, the long-awaited sequel to the acclaimed Season 4 episode USS Callister has finally arrived. And as I expected, it's a total waste of time. And that's coming from someone who loves Star Trek. It's also the weakest episode of the season. Let's talk about it. In Into Infinity... Oh, I promise I haven't done drugs. This is just... I have, nose issues. We are treated to another open-end tale of the crew of the USS Callister, a ship existing inside the game Infinity, populated by digital clones of the real-world people created by the now-deceased Robert Daly, the co-creator of the game, who passed away months ago under mysterious circumstances. We open on a nightmare inside the mind of Nanette, or Clawnette, as I'll call her, because she is the clone of the real-life Nanette, who's seeing visions of her past torture by Daly. A much-needed recap of the last episode for those of us who enjoyed the original, but not enough to think that it warranted a sequel. Much less 2, which is likely what we're gonna get, because again, the ending of this episode is also open. Turns out, Clawnette and her crew are fucked, as the surge in item prices has made them have to resort to robbing other players of their credits to survive, as they now exist in a public game server and need to pay for their things. However, they're not having player tags makes it nearly impossible for the victims of the robberies to report them, and they're also under the danger of being killed, as they, unlike the other players, can bleed, and if they die, there's no real world to go back to. Speaking of the real world, Nanette, the real Nanette, still holds her job at the company that created the game, and has yet to grow a backbone, but she takes to spying her boss, Walton, when a journalist comes to visit the company and discovers he's writing a story about the deceased Bob Daly, and has been able to identify the DNA digital cloner, a machine that has been banned globally due to being an infringement of human rights, as people were apparently using it to torture digital versions of real humans. The reporter is quickly kicked out of the office by a very distressed Walton, who begins to plan his fleeing of the country, and he's interrupted by Nanette, claiming that she knows a way to find the robbers, and is granted every single access that she might possibly need by him, including access to another former co-worker, because he just quit another co-worker's computer, which is just, I don't think you can do that. After watching footage uploaded by someone who was robbed, Nanette quickly figures out that the robbers are Nate and herself, and tells her boss she was at Daly's apartment when he died, horrible thing to tell someone, and was blackmailed to break in by a strange voice that, after the coding, turns out to be her own, allowing her to come to the conclusion that Daly made copies of them and placed them into the game, and the only way to revert that would be accessing his computer, which she believes to be gone by now, but is actually in Walton's possession. Pause here. The reaction that Walton has to finding out that the man he created the company with actually used DNA of his son to clone him into the game and do God knows what is not the reaction that I was expecting. It's not a reaction that is big enough. And I feel like if anyone else found that out, they would be more expressive. But Walton doesn't. And of course, we come to find out it's because he is a bad person. But I feel like that warranted a little bit more from Walton. I would freak out. I would kill him again, I think. I would make him to kill him again. Back in the game, Clannad figures out a plan to save them by building a server for themselves and locking it so only they can live inside their own universe. But as Daly is dead both in real life and in game, and Walton is dead in game and would kill them if he found out in real life that they exist, they can't access the restricted code that would allow them to build the universe because they are the only two people that can authorize such a thing. Miraculously, though, Carl becomes useful by revealing Walton has quarters in the ship, which would be impossible as they were assigned quarters once they passed through the wormhole into the public server, which happened after Walton fried himself to death. It was a gruesome, lovely scene. Meaning a part of Walton would need to have been alive in the public server for him to have quarters, and that part would have been enough for him to respawn in a new planet. Meaning if they can figure out a planet that was created at the exact moment they passed through the wormhole, they can find a version of Walter, Clouter, that will allow them to enter into the heart of infinity and build their own planet for themselves, their own universe, apart from everyone, like they had before. Real-life Nanette quickly realizes the same thing and finds the planet, instantly transporting herself and Walton to that planet, finding Clawton and Clannad there, with Clannad convincing Clawton and his friend Rocky, who is a rock, and a spoof of the, what is it, like a volleyball from, I forgot the name of that movie, Castaway, I think. Except the rock has a hole in the back. You can guess for what it is. To join them in the spaceship, and Nanette and Walton join them. Just all four of them, and the rock goes with them to the spaceship. Weird. The rock will be important. In the spaceship, Walton finds out the clones plan to access the Heart of Infinity so they can build their own server. And he shoots Carl, killing him. Thank you. As he tries to eliminate all the clones, resulting in Clannad killing him and kicking him out of the game and demanding Nanette to leave to stop him from attempting to come back and kill everyone else. Walton and Nanette get into an argument. She quits her job and leaves the building, being hit by a deus ex machina of a car and left by Walton to be rescued by the driver. She ends up in a deep coma with her brain being so damaged she'd never come back from it. And if she did, she wouldn't be the same, which Clannad discovers via a telephone call to the hospital where she pretends to be Nanette's sister. Because they can call the real world from the game. Walton decides to tell Clannad why his real-world counterpart is so terrified of their accessing the Heart of Infinity, telling the story of how Infinity came to be. Basically, the story goes that Walton was a rich, spoiled trust fund baby, to no one's surprise, constantly looking for things to invest his money on. One day, he heard of a genius coder who was developing a new game and decides to ride down to meet him, ending up in suburbia, some sort of suburbia. He describes Bob Daly as being a huge space fleet nerd who didn't understand the lucrative business he had on his hands, and he convinces Bob to turn his immersive experience into a real video game, needing him to work day and night to create more for the game. Bob can't work fast enough, though, as he is the only person able to create the game, so Walton reaches for another one of his failed investments, a machine originally designed by the porn industry to replicate people in VR using any little bit of DNA and data to create a virtual fuck toy of whoever the player wanted. You can tell why that was outlawed, and I feel like if this machine existed in our world, it wouldn't be. But as the machine was banned before launch, he was the only person who, seemingly, he was one of the only people who was still in possession of one, which he introduces to Daly as a way of making him work less. Bob and Walton then insert a copy of Bob's consciousness, Clobbert, inside the code of the game, so he'd be able to build faster and spend his entire eternity only building infinity for infinity, making him a very angry clone with a shit ton of power, and yet Clannad still decides to go down to the Heart of Infinity to talk to this man. who abused her because she's smart. She goes down there, but as she finds Clobbert's perfect suburban hellscape, where he has been alone for over a decade, Walton sneaks back into the game, takes Rocky and bashes Cloten in the head, then pretends to be him and invites every single player they have ever robbed to come into battle, instantly dipping to watch their annihilation from the safety of his office by introducing a new feature of the game that is watch mode. I don't know if that existed in the original episode. I haven't rewatched the original episode, but it seems also a Deus Ex Machina thing. Claudette tells Clobbert the truth about his real-life counterpart, which he doesn't believe since, as he states repeatedly, he's a nice guy who would never hurt anyone unprovoked, emphasis on unprovoked. But he does agree to help Claudette, building her a closed-off universe server for her and her crew, then telling her that she also has the option to go back into the real world, as her human counterpart, her Audi, has suffered brain death and will never be coming back. So she can just transport to inside of the brain of the real Nanette because she's brain dead. So, and I mean, I feel like brain dead also means that your brain functions don't work anymore. But anyway, she's brain dead, so she can just transport back into the real world because Nanette is connected to machines via a bunch of the nubbies that they also use for the game, because they use those things for everything, apparently. They're very handy, I will give them that. That's probably why they show up so much in the series. She is ecstatic by that knowledge until he reveals she has to choose one, presenting her with a Matrix parody of a blue disc, which would transport her and her friends into a private server, or a red disc, which would get her back to the real world but completely wipe out her crew as she's tethered to the ship, and if she leaves, they will all die. Turns out this was all a bit of like harmless fun, a joke that was played by Klob so he could reenact a scene from his favorite show, Space Fleet, where a captain is made to choose between himself and his crew to test his nobility. And when he chooses his crew, he finds out that there is a secret third thing, which Claudette assumes would be both. But she assumed wrong. Clobber then starts copy and pasting, as he calls it, before Claudette corrects him that it must be cut and paste, since if there are clones of the crew, they will be illegals who must be destroyed. He states that his intention isn't to copy the crew, but to copy her, so that a version of her will remain there in the heart of infinity with him. And he promises that he will treat her well and do no funny stuff. Unless she wants it. Of course, proving that he does only see women as disposable objects existing only for his pleasure and nothing else. And of course, if he was able to have these feelings later in life, he would already have them like earlier in his life, because 10 years might be a lot before men of his age who already looked like he hated women when he met Walton. Of course, he hates women. That's the whole thing. Claudette tries to speak some sense into him by telling him that she understands that he might not see himself as someone who is capable of hurting others, but that power just doesn't agree with him. Fucked up thing to tell an incel. And he's bound to abuse it, which he immediately proves by making her nightmares come true and taking away her mouth, disarming her and throwing her against the shelves, ending up dead with an axe to the face that Claudette manages to catch, which instantly causes the world to collapse. He is the heart of infinity, so his death would mean the end of the game. Claudette panics and searches in a pile of discs where she's very angry that he doesn't label his shit. So she just finds the random blue disc and inserts it through an old school computer. Turns out she chose the right one, kind of. And she awakens in the hospital to find out that she now has full access to her real life body. But her happiness is soon diminished by the realization that the crew is now in her brain and not a private server. And since the game and all of its servers have been deleted, that is where they will stay until further notice. Sucks. We end on a semi-positive note, and I mean semi, with the crew and Claudette, now Nanette, watching the news of Walton being arrested by the FBI after evading arrest for 3 months, and is being charged with counts of fraud, digital human rights abuse, embezzlement, failure to report, and a lot more. And Nanette promising that she's working on a plan to get them out of her brain. And because of the little thing that we see on Plaything, that is like a home device that Cameron Walker implants in the back of his head, I think it would definitely be like possible to take them out of there. Hopefully. We'll find out when the sequel to this comes out, which is inevitable. Honestly speaking, USS Callister didn't need a sequel. It stood fine on its own as an homage to Star Trek, which also explored the dangers of deepfake technology and how toxic masculinity leads men to act increasingly more violent towards women. And unsurprisingly enough, this episode delivers the exact same message, but in a different font, with the only highlight of it being the knowledge that the crew is now stuck inside of Nanette's mind, forced to see the world through her eyes until further notice. Ultimately, this episode feels like it's an hour and a half of writers patting themselves on the back about how good and smart they are to acknowledge women's suffering without much substance to back it up. There's no real commentary being made besides the obvious statement that nice guys suck and are incredibly toxic and dangerous to women. But Walton's misogyny, racism, and unprofessionalism isn't explored at all besides the bare minimum that he's kind of the worst. Other than that little end note, the series also brings some sweet Easter eggs in the form of news channel USN story headlines, which appear at the bottom of Nanette's screen and reveal that the reboot of Hotel Reverie has just been released on Streamberry, which means that they're taking place at the same time. A famous talisman has been found in a plane wreckage, meaning this obviously comes after Demon 79 because Demon 79 said 1979. Throngless 2 has launched to critical acclaim. R.I.P. Colin Rittman. And the CEO of Rivermind, the company that in episode 1 created the whole fix your brain thing, has stepped down. Also, I think if Nanette had a family, which apparently she doesn't, I don't remember if that's ever addressed in episode 1, I'm sorry, and the first USS Callister. But if Nanette had a family, they would be able to use Rivermind to bring her back. That's, I think, something that I would like to see more. I don't know, because she would be able to pay for it as well, so we would be able to see it from a perspective of someone who has money. Another sweet Easter egg for myself and the 3 other people who genuinely enjoyed Demon 79 is the return of the actors who played Nita and Gop, now playing Infinity players who come back to attack USS Callister, speaking to how Gop told Nita that, or Nida, I think it's Nita, that once he fails his assignment, he will be thrown into the vast void of the universe and be alone forever, and he invites her to come be alone with him. And she says yes, and they're still together. I just think that's cute. With Nita even having like little devil horns, which is so fun. And I think this speaks to how boring this episode was for me because I was just looking for Easter eggs. And as much as Into Infinity is adorned from head to toe with cool visuals and references to the sci-fi classics of yore, it ultimately brings nothing new to both the universe of Black Mirror and the expanded universe of USS Callister, making it a skip and the weakest one of the season. More in terms of being unnecessary and trying way too hard to justify its own existence than anything else, since it is written well, obviously, and well enough that it doesn't hurt to watch, but it serves no purpose. I would like to have seen quite literally anything else, any other story further developed. I mean, we got a sequel to Bandersnatch that they barely advertised. They advertised this sequel more than Bandersnatch, which is crazy because Bandersnatch was their only interactive game episode. This one should have been an interactive one as well, I feel, but I don't think they could do that in the series format. Have like just that one be interactive and the other one's not. But that just might be due to my personal lack of connection to USS Callister. I am a huge sci-fi fan and I really like Star Trek and Star Wars, but like Star Trek, I'm a big Trekkie, but like, why? Why? If anything, I think it would be interesting to have, if you must have an episode inside the universe of USS Callister, I would have liked to see Space Fleet. I would have liked to see something to do with Space Fleet. Like, if you had an episode set in the 60s, right, where it's literally the actors who are in Space Fleet, and they're going about their lives and acting in the series, and maybe there's a new piece of technology that's being developed and they have to work with that technology. That would have been cool. Or maybe like a legacy show based on Space Fleet. The fans are angry and they're doing something around technology. I don't know. I would have liked to see that more than this. So, final thoughts on season 7 of Black Mirror. It was good. It was a very good season. I definitely think it made up for the lacklusterness of the last couple of seasons. I didn't mind season 6. Again, I'm one of the only people who actually enjoyed Demon 79, but season 5 was ass. But like, season 6 was fine. Season 7 really feels like a return to form for Black Mirror. It really feels like the British Black Mirror. That's what I liked about it. It was very well written, very well acted. The effects are great. And my final... what is it called in English? Fuck. Final ranking. I remembered. My final ranking of the episodes would be Eulogy in number 1, then Common People in number 2, then Plaything in number 3, then Bête Noire in number 4, Hotel Reverie in number 5, and USS Callister into Infinity, unsurprisingly, in number 6. And that's not to say that it's a bad episode. I just didn't like it. It wasn't for me. If you just genuinely liked USS Callister, you're gonna like it more. But anyway, thank you for watching. This is so long. Thank you for watching. I don't know how long it's gonna take me to edit this. If you want to follow me on social media, my link tree is somewhere in the channel, and you can find me in other social medias. You can also read my blog, where this entire script has been posted in like different sections, per like divided by episode, and I have reviews of other things. So thanks for watching. Bye bye.